The velvet curtains smelled of dust and dreams as I pressed my face into them, peering through the narrow gap at the audience gathering in the theater below. From this hidden vantage point in the wings, I could see them all, the critics with their notepads, the wealthy patrons in their finery, the young dreamers in cheaper seats at the back. None of them knew who I really was. None of them knew what I had sacrificed to stand here tonight. My name is Charlotte Kingsley, though that isn't the name I was born with. 5 years ago, I was Eliza Thorpe, the eldest daughter of Bernard Thorpe, a man whose ambitions far exceeded his dwindling fortune. I was a bargaining chip, a pretty face to be sold to the highest bidder, a means to secure my family's status in a world that valued connections above all else. 5 minutes, Miss Kingsley, the stage manager whispered, his voice breaking through my reverie. I nodded, my fingers instinctively checking the pins securing my elaborate wig. Tonight was the opening of Thornfield's newest production, The Heiress's Choice, and I was the lead, an irony not lost on me. The backstage mirror reflected a woman transformed, kohl-rimmed eyes, rouge-tinted cheeks, lips painted the deep red of secrets. Beneath the costume and makeup was the girl who had fled in the dead of night, a hastily packed satchel clutched to her chest, $27, and her grandmother's locket her only possessions. The memory of that night still sent shivers down my spine. I've found you a husband, Father had announced over dinner, swirling brandy in his crystal glass as if he hadn't just shattered my world. Theodore Blackwell. From the Shipping Blackwells. The contract will be signed on Saturday. Mother had looked down at her plate, unwilling to meet my gaze. My younger sisters, Lillian and Georgia, exchanged worried glances across the table. Contract? I'd repeated, my voice barely audible over the ringing in my ears. Don't be difficult, Eliza. Father's tone had held that dangerous edge that appeared whenever his authority was questioned. The Blackwells are willing to settle our debts in exchange for the match. Theodore needs a well-bred wife, and you, he'd looked me up and down with clinical detachment, you're pretty enough to catch his eye. He's 45, a bit old, but established. Wealthy. I don't know him. The inadequacy of my protest had hung in the air between us. You don't need to know him, Father had snapped. You need to obey me. The sound of the orchestra tuning up pulled me back to the present. The overture would begin soon, and then I would step onto that stage and become someone else entirely, a woman who made her own choices, who defied expectations, who seized her own destiny. How strange that I would find freedom in pretending to be someone else, when pretending to be the dutiful daughter had been my prison. A knock at my dressing room door startled me. Before I could respond, it opened, revealing a large bouquet of white roses obscuring the face of whoever carried them. Special delivery for the star of the show, came a familiar voice. The flowers lowered to reveal James Anderson, his gray eyes twinkling with pride. My heart performed its usual flutter at the sight of him, my director, my mentor, and the first person who had seen something in me beyond a pretty face to be bartered away. From your adoring public? I asked, taking the bouquet and inhaling their sweet fragrance. From your adoring director, James corrected, leaning against the doorframe. At 42, with salt and pepper hair and laugh lines that crinkled when he smiled, he carried an air of confidence that came from knowing his place in the world. How are you feeling? Terrified, I admitted. Exhilarated. He nodded, understanding both the spoken and unspoken. James had found me 5 years ago, sleeping in the back row of his theater after sneaking in to escape the rain. Instead of calling the police, he had offered me a job sweeping floors and selling tickets. He never pressed for details about my past, but over the years, in bits and pieces, I had told him most of it. You're ready for this, Charlotte, he said, using the name I had chosen for myself. A queen's name. A name with strength. You've earned it. His quiet confidence steadied my nerves like nothing else could. Thank you, I whispered. Break a leg. He hesitated, then added, someone's been asking about you at the box office. A man. Says he's an old family friend. Ice replaced the blood in my veins. What did he look like? Older gentleman. Distinguished. Had an aristocratic way of speaking. The room seemed to tilt. Father, I breathed. James's expression hardened. Do you want me to send him away? I closed my eyes, gathering my thoughts. 5 years of building a new life, of transforming myself from a commodity to be traded into an artist to be admired. 5 years of looking over my shoulder, wondering when my past would catch up to me. No, I decided, opening my eyes. Let him stay. Let him see. James studied my face, concern creasing his brow. Are you sure? I'm not that frightened girl anymore, James. I won't let him intimidate me. The words sounded braver than I felt. If you change your mind. I won't, I interrupted, straightening my spine. This is my night. My triumph. He can't take that from me. Doubt flickered across James's face, but he nodded. I'll be watching. If you need anything. I know. I managed a small smile. Now go. A director shouldn't be fussing over one actress when there's an entire production about to begin. He chuckled, the tension breaking. When that actress is my star? I begged to differ. With one last encouraging nod, he left, closing the door softly behind him. Alone again, I turned back to the mirror. The woman who stared back at me was both familiar and strange, Eliza's features, but Charlotte's confidence. The face of someone who had made her own way. The orchestra's first notes drifted up from the pit. The overture had begun. It was time to face my audience. And somewhere among them, my father. The stage lights were blinding as I stepped into their embrace, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. For the first few seconds, the audience was nothing but a sea of indistinct faces swallowed by darkness. Then, as my eyes adjusted, details emerged, the shimmer of jewelry, the flutter of programs, the expectant hush that fell as I began my first lines. The words flowed from me, lines I had rehearsed countless times transformed into something alive and vibrant. I became Grace Huntington, the heiress who discovers her father's plans to marry her off to save the family fortune. The irony of the role was not lost on the woman who had once been Eliza Thorpe, but Charlotte Kingsley used that emotional truth to breathe life into her character. As the first act progressed, I scanned the audience during my stage crosses, searching for my father's face. I found him in the third row, center, the most expensive seats in the house. He looked older than I remembered, his once dark hair now steel gray, his face more lined. But his posture remained ramrod straight, his chin lifted with the same aristocratic arrogance that had dominated our household. Our eyes met across the footlights. A jolt of recognition passed between us. I saw his slight intake of breath, the momentary widening of his eyes. Then, deliberately, I looked away, delivering my next line directly to the gentleman seated at the opposite end of the row. A woman is not chattel to be traded at her father's convenience, I declared, my voice ringing with conviction. My heart and hand are mine alone to give. The audience murmured their approval. From the corner of my eye, I saw father shift uncomfortably in his seat. Good. By the final act, I had poured every ounce of my experience into my performance. The audience was enthralled, gasping at revelations, laughing at the occasional witty barb, falling into reverent silence during the emotional soliloquies. When the final curtain fell, the theater erupted into applause. I stepped forward from my bow, breathless and exhilarated, tears pricking behind my eyes. As the curtain rose and fell for the third time, I caught sight of Father's empty seat. He had gone. The knowledge should have brought relief. Instead, a curious disappointment settled in my chest. After all this time, he still couldn't face what he'd done, or who I'd become without him. The cast party afterward was a blur of congratulations and champagne toasts. Critics circulated, dropping favorable comments that would appear in tomorrow's papers. Theater patrons hovered, hoping to exchange a few words with the discovery of the season. Through it all, I maintained my smile, accepted compliments graciously, played the part of the grateful ingenue. But my mind was elsewhere, caught between past and present, between Eliza and Charlotte. "You were magnificent." James appeared at my elbow, offering a fresh glass of champagne. The finest Grace Huntington I could have imagined. I accepted the glass with a grateful smile. Perhaps because I understood her so well. Perhaps. His gray eyes studied me with the perception that had first recognized my potential all those years ago. "Your special viewer left early." I noticed. "Are you disappointed?" I considered the question, rolling the stem of my glass between my fingers. I thought I wanted him to see me succeed, to realize what he almost destroyed. But now I'm not sure what I wanted. James nodded thoughtfully. "Closure can be elusive." "Miss Kingsley." A theater patron approached, hand extended. "What a performance." "Absolutely transcendent." "You must tell me, how did you capture Grace's emotional journey so perfectly?" "I simply imagined myself in her position," I replied with a practiced smile. What woman hasn't felt the constraints of society's expectations? As the conversation continued, I felt James's steadying presence beside me. He fielded questions when I faltered, steered over-enthusiastic admirers away when their attention became overwhelming, remained a constant anchor throughout the evening. It was nearly midnight when we finally escaped, slipping out the stage door into the cool night air. The narrow alley behind the theater was quiet save for the distant sounds of carriages on the main street. "Shall I call you a cab?" James offered, shrugging into his overcoat. "I think I'll walk," I said, drawing my shawl tighter around my shoulders. "The night air will clear my head." Concern furrowed his brow. "It's late, Charlotte." "I'll be fine." I needed solitude to process the emotions swirling within me. "My apartment isn't far." "Then I'll walk with you." His tone brooked no argument. I wouldn't be much of a gentleman if I let my leading lady wander the streets alone at midnight. Part of me wanted to insist on independence, but the truth was, I welcomed his company. We fell into step together, our footfalls echoing on the cobblestones. "Do you think he'll come back?" I asked after a few minutes of comfortable silence. James didn't need to ask who I meant. "Would you want him to?" "I don't know." I gazed up at the sliver of moon visible between buildings. Part of me wants to confront him, to make him acknowledge what he tried to do. Another part never wants to see him again. "And what would you say if you did confront him?" The question caught me off guard. What would I say to the man who had seen me as nothing more than a transaction? Who had been willing to sell his own daughter to clear his debts? "I'd ask him if it was worth it," I said finally. "If whatever he gained from selling me was worth losing a daughter." James was quiet for a moment. "And what would you tell your younger self? The girl who ran away that night?" That question was easier. That she was braver than she knew. that she made the right choice. We rounded the corner onto my street, a row of modest apartments where many of the theater's company resided. Lamplight spilled from windows, creating pools of golden light on the pavement. And there, standing beneath the nearest lamp, was a figure I recognized instantly. Father. He was staring at the entrance to my building, his back straight, his silver-headed cane planted firmly on the ground. He hadn't seen us yet. I froze. James's hand came to rest on my arm, a silent question. "It's him," I whispered unnecessarily. "Do you want to go somewhere else? We can turn around." I considered the offer. It would be easy to flee, to postpone this confrontation for another day, or forever. But Charlotte Kingsley didn't run from challenges. I had spent 5 years becoming someone stronger than the frightened girl who had fled in the night. No, I decided. I need to face him. James nodded, understanding as always. "I'll stay with you." Drawing a deep breath, I stepped forward into the lamplight. Father's head turned at the sound, his eyes widening as he recognized me. Eliza. My birth name sounded strange on his lips after so long. "Charlotte," I corrected firmly. "My name is Charlotte Kingsley now." He looked me up and down, taking in my evening attire, the theater makeup I hadn't bothered to remove, the confident way I held myself. "You've changed." That was rather the point. A tense silence fell between us. Father's gaze shifted to James, who stood protectively at my side. "And who is this gentleman?" "James Anderson. Charlotte's director." James extended his hand, which father regarded with suspicion before reluctantly shaking it. "I saw your performance tonight," father said, turning back to me. The way he hesitated before the word performance spoke volumes about his opinion of my profession. "And what did you think?" I couldn't help asking, hating the way a part of me still craved his approval. He frowned slightly, tapping his cane against the cobblestones. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic. Even as a child." The dismissal stung more than it should have. 5 years of building a new life, and he could still reduce me to a petulant child with a few carefully chosen words. "Is that why you came here?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "To belittle my achievements?" "I came because your mother is ill." Father's voice was flat, emotionless. "The doctor says she hasn't long. She's been asking for you." The news hit me like a physical blow. Mother, with her quiet acquiescence, her averted eyes, her silent complicity in father's plans. I had resented her weakness almost as much as I had resented his tyranny. But she was still my mother. "I'm sorry to hear that," I managed, genuinely meaning it. "She wants to see you. To make peace." He grimaced slightly, as if the words tasted bitter on his tongue. "Your sisters, too. They've missed you. Lillian and Georgia." My throat tightened at the thought of them. They would be women now, not the gangly teenagers I had left behind. Had they followed the path that had been laid out for me? Had they been bartered away to secure connections or settle debts? Where are they now? My sisters? At home. Where they belong. Father's pointed emphasis made his opinion of my current situation clear. "And have you sold them off too?" The words escaped before I could stop them. Father's face darkened. "You know nothing of the sacrifices I've made for this family." "Nothing." "I know exactly what sacrifices you were willing to make." I stepped closer, anger lending me courage. "Or rather, who you were willing to sacrifice." "Eliza." "Charlotte," I corrected again, more forcefully. "You abandoned your family, Father continued as if I hadn't spoken. Left us to face ruin without a thought for anyone but yourself. I abandoned a prison sentence, I shot back. Theodore Blackwell was 45 years old. I was 19. You would have sold me to a man older than yourself to clear your gambling debts. Father's grip tightened on his cane. It was a respectable match. The Blackwells are one of the oldest families in. I don't care if they're descended from royalty. You had no right to arrange my marriage without my consent. I had every right, he thundered. I was your father. Your guardian. It was my duty to secure your future. My future? I laughed bitterly. You mean your future. Your position in society. Your comfortable lifestyle. Father's jaw worked, his eyes flashing with the temper I remembered all too well from childhood. For a moment, I thought he might strike me with his cane. Instead, he drew himself up, looking down his nose in the way that had once made me shrink into myself. I see this theatrical environment has only encouraged your insolence, he said coldly. Perhaps it was a mistake to come. Perhaps it was, I agreed, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. Father turned to leave, then paused. Your mother asked me to give you this. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. It belonged to your grandmother. She thought you should have it. I accepted the package, feeling its weight in my palm. Thank her for me. Father nodded stiffly, then glanced at James, who had remained silent throughout our exchange. I hope you know what you've gotten yourself involved with, Mr. Anderson. My daughter has always had a talent for dramatics and disappointment. James's voice was calm but steely. What I know, Mr. Thorpe, is that Charlotte is the most talented actress I've ever had the privilege to work with. Her performance tonight moved the audience to tears. Whatever disappointments may exist between you are yours alone. Father's nostrils flared, but he offered no reply. With one last cold look at me, he turned and walked away, his cane striking the cobblestones with angry precision. I watched him go, emotions warring within me, anger, hurt, and a strange, unexpected grief for what might have been. Are you all right? James asked softly when Father had disappeared around the corner. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Come, he said gently. Let's get you inside. My apartment was small but comfortable, the walls adorned with playbills from past productions, the furniture worn but chosen with care. It was nothing like the grand house I had grown up in, with its imposing portraits and austere furnishings, but it was mine. James moved about with familiar ease, lighting the lamps while I sank onto the settee, still clutching the brown paper parcel Father had delivered. Would you like tea? James offered, already filling the kettle. Something stronger, I think. He nodded, abandoning the kettle in favor of the small cabinet where I kept a bottle of brandy. As he poured 2 glasses, I carefully unwrapped the package. Inside was a small wooden box, its surface smooth with age and handling. I recognized it immediately, grandmother's keepsake box, which had sat on her dresser for as long as I could remember. Mother had inherited it when grandmother died, keeping it on her own vanity as a treasured connection to her mother. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, and beneath it, grandmother's pearl earrings, the ones she had worn on her own wedding day, and mother after her. I unfolded the note, recognizing mother's delicate handwriting immediately. My dearest Eliza. If you are reading this, Bernard has found you at last. I pray that you are well, that you have found happiness in the life you chose for yourself. I have thought of you every day since you left, wondering where you were, if you were safe, if you had found the freedom you sought. I know I failed you. When your father announced the arrangement with Theodore Blackwell, I should have stood with you against him. Instead, I remained silent, as I had been silent too many times in our marriage. My own mother warned me against such silence on my wedding day when she gave me these earrings. They were meant to remind me that a woman should never lose her voice, even in marriage. I failed to heed that reminder, but perhaps you need not make the same mistake. The doctors tell me I haven't long. Before I go, I wanted you to have these, not as a bride, but as a woman who had the courage I lacked. Your sisters ask about you often. Lillian is engaged now, but unlike you, she has chosen her match herself. Your example gave her the courage to insist on her own choice. Georgia has begun painting again, something your father once discouraged. You changed things when you left, my darling. More than you know. Be happy, Eliza, or whatever name you call yourself now. Know that I love you, and that I am proud of the woman you have become. Your loving mother. Tears streamed down my face as I read the letter again, then once more. James sat quietly beside me, offering his handkerchief without comment. My mother is dying, I said finally, my voice barely audible. She says I changed things by leaving. That my sisters, my throat closed around the words. Sometimes the bravest thing we do has consequences we never intended, James murmured, gently taking the letter from my trembling hands and placing it on the side table. Good consequences. I nodded, wiping my eyes. All this time, I thought I was just saving myself. But I was showing them another path too. You were. James took my hands in his. Charlotte, you don't have to decide anything tonight. But if you wanted to see your mother, your sisters, I would understand. The thought of returning to that house, facing father again, made my stomach clench. But the thought of never seeing mother again, of missing the chance to say goodbye, to make peace, that was somehow worse. I don't know if I can, I whispered. You performed in front of 300 people tonight, bringing them to tears and laughter with your talent, James reminded me. You are stronger than you know. I looked into his kind eyes, finding the steady support that had been my anchor these past 5 years. Would you come with me? If I went? Of course. He squeezed my hands. Wherever you need me to be, I'm there. The simple promise unleashed fresh tears. James pulled me into his arms, holding me as I wept for the family I had left, for the mother I was losing, for the sisters who had found their own courage through my absence. When the tears finally subsided, I pulled back slightly, looking up at his concerned face. I'm sorry. Don't be, he said softly. You have nothing to apologize for. In that moment, with my face tear-streaked and my heart raw, I realized what had been growing between us for years. It wasn't just gratitude I felt for the man who had given me a chance, who had nurtured my talent, who had stood beside me through triumph and doubt. It was something deeper, something I had been too focused on survival and reinvention to fully acknowledge. James, I began, uncertain how to express what I was feeling. His gaze was tender, understanding. I know, he said simply. And he did. Without words, he understood the emotions swirling within me, the vulnerability, the fear, the tentative hope. We don't have to talk about it now, he continued gently. You have enough to process tonight. I nodded, grateful for his patience. Thank you. For everything. He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from my face with a touch so light it might have been a whisper. Get some rest, Charlotte. Tomorrow is soon enough to make decisions. As he rose to leave, I thought about the two paths before me, returning to confront the past or continuing to forge ahead without looking back. Neither seemed entirely right or wrong. James, I called as he reached the door. What would you do? If you were me? He turned, his expression thoughtful. I would listen to my heart. But I would also remember that forgiveness, whether given or received, is not about erasing the past. It's about creating space for the future. With those words hanging in the air between us, he left, closing the door softly behind him. I sat alone in my small apartment, grandmother's earrings gleaming in the lamplight, mother's letter a bridge between who I had been and who I had become. Tomorrow, I would decide which path to take. Tonight, I would remember that I had the strength to choose for myself, now and always. The morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching my uncertain mood. I had slept fitfully, dreams filled with fragments of the past, mother's quiet sadness, father's thunderous disapproval, my sister's wide-eyed witness to the dynamics that shaped our household. I woke feeling drained but resolute. I would go home. Not to stay, not to reconcile with father, but to see mother before it was too late, to meet the women my sisters had become in my absence. After sending a note to James informing him of my decision, I dressed with particular care, choosing a modest but fashionable gown in deep blue, arranging my hair in a simple style that was neither the elaborate coiffure of Charlotte Kingsley on stage nor the demure arrangement Eliza Thorpe had once worn. I was someone new now, a woman shaped by both parts of her life. Grandmother's pearl earrings completed my attire, a talisman against the confrontation to come. James arrived promptly at 10, his expression a mixture of concern and admiration as he took in my appearance. You look lovely, he said, helping me with my coat. Are you certain about this? No, I admitted with a small smile. But I'm doing it anyway. The cab ride to my childhood home in the fashionable part of the city was both interminable and too swift. As familiar landmarks appeared outside the window, memories surged, some pleasant, others painful. By the time we turned onto the tree-lined avenue where I had grown up, my stomach was in knots. We can still turn back, James offered, noting my tense posture. I shook my head. I've come this far. The Thorpe residence looked exactly as I remembered, an imposing Georgian townhouse with gleaming windows and a glossy black door bearing a polished brass knocker in the shape of a lion's head. As a child, that knocker had fascinated and frightened me in equal measure. Now, as I raised my hand to grasp it, I felt only a dull ache of familiarity. Before I could knock, the door swung open to reveal Wilson, our longtime butler, looking older but just as dignified as I remembered. Miss Eliza, he said, betraying only the slightest widening of his eyes at my appearance. We've been expecting you. Of course they had. Father must have informed the household of my imminent return. I forced a smile. Hello, Wilson. It's good to see you again. Wilson's stern features softened momentarily. And you, miss. If I may say so, you are looking well. Thank you. This is my friend, Mr. Anderson. Wilson nodded politely to James. Sir. May I take your coats? The familiar ritual of entering the house, coats removed, umbrella set in the stand by the door, Wilson's quiet efficiency, transported me back in time. For a moment, I was 19 again, stepping carefully to avoid father's notice, measuring my words to prevent his disapproval. Then James's hand settled at the small of my back, a gentle reminder of who I had become, and the sensation faded. Your mother is in the morning room, Wilson informed us. Miss Lillian and Miss Georgia are with her. Your father, he hesitated fractionally, is in his study. Thank goodness for small mercies, I thought. Thank you, Wilson. We know the way. The house was as I remembered, elegant, imposing, filled with expensive furnishings chosen more for appearance than comfort. Family portraits lined the staircase, generations of Thorpes gazing down with the same stern expression father had perfected. The familiar scent of beeswax polish and fresh flowers permeated the air. At the end of the hallway, the morning room door stood partially open, soft voices drifting out. My step faltered. "Charlotte," James murmured. "You can do this." Drawing a deep breath, I pushed the door open. The morning room had always been Mother's domain, the one space in the house where Father rarely intruded. It was brighter than the rest of the house, with pale yellow walls and comfortable furniture arranged to catch the light from the east-facing windows. Now, however, it had been transformed into a sick room. A hospital bed occupied the center of the room, surrounded by various medicines and medical paraphernalia. In that bed, propped up on pillows, was Mother, so thin and pale that at first, I barely recognized her. Her once lustrous brown hair, now streaked with gray, hung limply around her gaunt face. But her eyes, those were unchanged, lighting up with recognition as I entered. "Eliza," she breathed, extending a trembling hand toward me. "You came." Beside her sat my sisters, Lillian, now 22, her blonde hair swept into an elegant knot, and Georgia, 19, the same age I had been when I fled, her chestnut curls reminiscent of my own. "Charlotte," I corrected automatically, moving to take Mother's outstretched hand. "I go by Charlotte now." "Charlotte," Mother repeated, her smile tremulous. "It suits you. You look so confident. So beautiful." I blinked back tears. "Hello, Mother." Lillian and Georgia were staring at me as if I were an apparition, part familiar, part stranger. Then Georgia launched herself from her chair, flinging her arms around me. "You're really here," she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. "I thought Father was lying when he said he'd found you." I hugged her back, startled by how much she had grown. When I left, she had been a gangly 14-year-old with braces and a penchant for drawing flowers in the margins of her books. Now she was a young woman, nearly as tall as me. "I've missed you," I whispered, meaning it more than I had expected to. Lillian approached more cautiously, her expression a mixture of delight and uncertainty. Charlotte. Welcome home." "Thank you, Lil." I reached for her hand, which she took after only a moment's hesitation. "Mother's letter said you're engaged?" A blush spread across her fair features. "Yes. His name is William Hartford. He's a historian at the university." "She chose him herself," Mother said, pride evident in her weak voice. "Refused 2 more lucrative offers because she loved him." The implication was clear: Lillian had done what I had run away to avoid. She had stood her ground and won. "I'm so happy for you," I said sincerely. Then, remembering my companion, I turned. "This is James Anderson. He's the director of Thornfield Theatre, where I work." "Where you star," James corrected quietly. "Oh." George's eyes widened. "Are you an actress? A real one?" I nodded, smiling at her enthusiasm. "I am. We opened a new play last night, in fact." "Father said you were involved in theater," Lillian said, choosing her words carefully. "He didn't mention you were the star." "Father sees what he wants to see," I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my tone. Mother squeezed my hand. "We saw the advertisement in the paper weeks ago. The Heiress's Choice, starring Charlotte Kingsley. I knew immediately it was you." Surprise washed over me. "You recognized my stage name?" She nodded, a ghost of a smile playing at her lips. Charlotte was the name of that doll you loved as a child, the one you insisted had to sleep in your bed because she was afraid of the dark. And Kingsley was grandmother's maiden name, I finished, touched that she had made the connection. I wanted to see your performance, Mother continued, her voice growing weaker. But by then, I was already too ill to leave the house. I'll arrange a private performance, James offered, speaking for the first time since we'd entered the room. If Mrs. Thorpe feels up to it, perhaps Charlotte could perform a scene or two here. Mother's face lit up. Oh, would you? I shot James a grateful look. Of course. I'd be happy to. What's the play about? Georgia asked eagerly. Is it romantic? Tragic? It's about a young woman whose father tries to arrange her marriage to save the family fortune, I explained, watching their reactions. She has to decide whether to obey her father or follow her heart. Lillian and Georgia exchanged glances. That sounds familiar, Lillian said carefully. Art often imitates life, James remarked. A tense silence fell over the room, broken only by the ticking of the mantel clock. I received your letter, I said finally, turning back to Mother. And grandmother's earrings. Thank you. They suit you, she replied, her eyes trailing to the pearls at my ears. More than they ever suited me. That's not true, I protested. You always looked beautiful in them. But I never heard their message, Mother said softly. Her gaze shifted to James, then back to me. Are you happy, Charlotte? Truly? I considered the question, thinking of my small apartment, my burgeoning career, the friends I had made at the theater. Yes, I answered honestly. I am. Relief washed over her features. Then it was worth it. You're leaving. The words hung between us, charged with meaning. Mother reached out, her thin fingers closing around mine with surprising strength. I want you to know something, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Your father, he's not a monster, Charlotte. Misguided, controlling, trapped by his own upbringing, yes. But after you left, something broke in him. I stiffened, unwilling to hear defenses of the man who had tried to sell me. He searched for you, she continued. For months. Hired detectives, contacted old acquaintances. When they found nothing, he would sit in your room sometimes, just staring at your things. Mother, I began, a protest forming on my lips. I'm not asking you to forgive him, she interrupted. Only to understand that your absence changed us all. You showed such courage, courage I never had. A discreet knock interrupted our conversation as Wilson appeared in the doorway, his expression grave. Forgive the intrusion, but the doctor has arrived for Mrs. Thorpe's examination. James stepped forward. We should give them privacy, he suggested gently. Perhaps Miss Lillian could show us the garden? As we moved toward the door, Mother called out weakly, Charlotte, will you return tomorrow? I looked back at her fragile form amid the pristine bedsheets. Yes, Mother. I'll come back. In the hallway, we nearly collided with Father, emerging from his study. He froze at the sight of us, his gaze flickering between me and James. You came, he said stiffly. For Mother, I replied. Not for you. Something flashed in his eyes, pain, regret, anger, I couldn't tell. Then he nodded once, stepping aside to let us pass. That evening, as James walked me to my door, I realized that returning home hadn't weakened me as I'd feared. Instead, I felt stronger, surer of the path I'd chosen. Will you be all right? James asked, his hand warm on mine. Yes, I answered, surprised by how true it felt. I'm not that frightened girl anymore. No, he agreed, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. You're Charlotte Kingsley, the woman who made her own destiny. His words enveloped me like a promise as I stepped across the threshold, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring.